He knows about the book, obviously, and he's...
Wait, so you guys still talk?
Oh, yeah, we're back together.
Oh, my God. Welcome back to another episode of the I'm Uncomfortable podcast, the podcast for people who want to be okay with being uncomfortable. I'm your host, Vanessa, and...
Melissa.
And today we have a very special guest coming back on the show. We're so excited. This is Jessica Smith, author of the book, this is your second book. So author of her second book, Thank You for Dumping Me, From Breakdown to Breakthrough, The Journey Back to You. We're going to talk all about the book. It made me very anxious and uncomfortable. And then I also cried at the end. So a whole journey. But if you'd like to just introduce yourself to our audience, that would be amazing.
I am so excited to be back, and I cannot wait to hear what your experience with the book was. And it's still so surreal even hearing that, this is the second book, but yeah, I'm super excited. Jessica Smith, I work in corporate by day, and at night I do a lot of different hobbies, and a lot of people are like, how do you do it all? And it's not all at the same time. That's really the trick. So the book's done now, and I can kind of shift focus, but this was a journey writing in itself. So
big book.
Yeah.
And then, as always, we start off by asking what's made you uncomfortable. So it can be about this, but it can be about anything.
This right here, like literally right now, my heart is pounding. My watch probably thinks I'm working out. I think just because, I am excited to talk about it, obviously. But the writing process is, so much of it is private. It's like kind of Stephen King calls it a closed door part of the process where it's just you and writing and at your desk, and there's no feedback. There's no kind of, hey, can you look this over? Or, it's this private thing. And then for me, like the first book, I had way more involvement with sharing the process with people. So by the time it was out, it was like already warmed up in like my psyche and emotional being. This one, I was off social media from this entire year, January until go live in July. And so it was like the book was out, and also all of a sudden I was like out in social media. And so it's, I guess this part, it's vulnerable because so much of the writing is kind of, over here in my room, and now talking about it's a whole nother thing. Yeah. So
it's everyone's now. Like, once you release your body of work, it's not just yours. It's now for everyone to consume and interpret for their own, like what you were just saying just now, like you can't wait to hear what notes Vanessa took and from reading her reading experience and the feelings that she felt.
Not even all of them. I took so many.
That's incredible. The Post-its are amazing. My approach to writing is always, my job is to write it, and then it's trying to keep a mindset of once it's out, it's none of my business. I did my part, and then people will, give feedback and all of that. Of course that's going to impact me, right? Of course I care about it and want to know what it is, but I need to keep kind of this idea of like, it's kind of its own little body of work. I feel like it's got its own little soul. So, here it is.
Well, I have to tell you, when I started reading, I couldn't keep reading. I had to keep stopping because I was it raised my own anxiety so much reading what you were going through. And I'm going to read the first line of the back of the book.
Okay.
He looks straight into my eyes. Jessica, when I picture my future, I don't see you as part of it. And already that first line, I was like, oh my God, like the fact that someone said that to you, and also like how devastating that must be.
Yes.
So can you just share, I know it says from breakdown to breakthrough, and it says, thank you for dumping me. So we know it's about a breakup, but like tell us more about the inspiration for getting that onto paper.
Yes. That line still impacts me because it was so straightforward. It was just so clear as day. There was no beating around the bush, and so there was no kind of reading between the lines. He made it very clear. After that happened, it was a blindsided moment. I didn't know it was going to happen at all. I didn't see it coming. We didn't really fight. There wasn't any kind of like obvious like, whoa, this is a opposite within us. I basically transcribed the conversation. It's what he said is in there.
Yeah.
But he knows about the book, obviously, and He's always
I
had.
wanted to ask that.
I know, like, well, he's had this perspective of like whatever is best for the book, do it. Which is
Wait, so you guys still talk?
Oh yeah, we're back together.
Oh my god, I was gonna say that for the end. Okay, wait, we're gonna circle back to that.
Oh,
but
oh.
I was curious about that, but I wasn't sure, so I was like, let me ask. But
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
That's like an extra layer
I
that
know.
I wasn't expecting. Oh my god.
Well, when we reconnected, I was in the midst of writing the book.
Okay.
And didn't know we were gonna, rekindle anything, because it was 4 years after the breakup.
Right.
I didn't
Oh,
speak.
wow.
We
I didn't realize
talk.
it
I
was-
didn't know we were ever going to reconnect ever.
That's so fascinating.
And that's part of why this story is like, I wanted to showcase just the messy middle, because you just never know timing, and you just never know what's going to happen, and things are never linear.
That's what my therapist says all the time, but I have a hard time believing her. It's fine. Okay, I wanted, of all the post-its that I have, so one of the things that heightened my anxiety was like you wrote about your date at the table in Willow Glen.
Yes.
And just like being one of those couples who's sitting there and not talking, but like you used to make fun of couples who are sitting there and not talking. So like how uncomfortable was that? Because shortly after then you have the conversation of, let's do this for the rest of our lives. Did you feel like you had to have that conversation? Like, were you pitching a future to him because you genuinely wanted to, or was it at the time because you felt like you were supposed to?
Yeah, so like the dinner that we went to was incredibly awkward, and that was kind of, in hindsight, I could see kind of the last ditch efforts of like points of connection. But at the time I was just like, oh, okay, we're just not connecting. But the realization of going, God, like we used to look at couples that don't speak, and now we are one of those couples that don't speak. After that date, I went home and I bought some books on Amazon, was like, this will solve it.
Yeah.
I got it. Like,
about it.
like,
figure it out.
Don't sweat the small things in love, and like all this stuff. And I'm like, and we never read them, so it's just, I was trying, but by that point there was already kind of divide.
I know in your breakup conversation, and I wanted to make sure that Melissa got to talk about this, you had like a whole bullet point list of questions. And you said earlier before you recorded that you actually never talked to him about it. Melissa, though, she had a whole bullet point list of questions too. And she actually had like a 2-part conversation. So I'm curious, Melissa, like what was that experience like for you, having all those questions and then going back to answer?
That relationship, a lot of people in my family and even my friends were like, oh wow, you guys are such like a good match, this seems like this is the guy, this is the one. And so Vanessa was one of those people. And I remember when it came to the point where we were breaking up, it was one of those things where I wasn't necessarily blindsided per se, but nothing was really like wrong. So I was still confused. I remember, I know me in that I will take time to process things. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to take this as it is. But then after like what was like a 3-hour discussion, I went home that night and then I sat with it for probably a couple hours and I was like, I have so many more questions just to make sure that I get the closure. And if it is, this is it, like I want to get the closure that I want and would make me feel more okay with this relationship ending. So I ended up texting him and I was like, okay, I want to talk one more time if that's okay with you. And we did. Like he was totally fine with that. We had a follow-up conversation just because I wanted to like clarify things, because things can get muddled in like a 3-hour long conversation.
Totally.
And you could say things and hear it, but at the same time, you're still processing the previous things that were being said. So for me and my like mental health and state at that time, I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to clarify so that we are both on the same page about this and then we can move on.
One, it's very cool that you guys were able to like come back together and have that discussion. One of the things in my experience though that I had to grapple with was the acceptance of not knowing. I wasn't willing to have that conversation with him. I had shut that door because I was so embarrassed, and like I was like, I can't. I thought it was running from it was easier, but then I became obsessed with knowing, because there's this idea that like if you know it won't hurt, but I think that's bullshit.
Yeah.
It's like if you know, like it's so what, you know more, but like I don't know, like in your case you had two people come together and meet halfway. I think I was trying to grapple and make sense of something without the other half of it. You know, I kind of just was like torturing myself trying to figure it out on my own in this like little obsession.
Did it make you feel better to have that conversation? Yeah.
I mean, yes, it for me personally, it did, just because I got a chance to really ask him the real, like, to be more clear. You were reading that first line of the back of the book and how it was very cut and clear. For me, it wasn't initially, he was trying to save like my feelings basically by kind of not sugarcoating it, but kind of beating around the bush on a couple of things. And I was just like, okay, you say all that you need to say, probably like word vomit, all these things that you probably have been feeling for a while, it seems. And then that's when I was like, okay, let me have a follow-up conversation now that all of that is out of the way. From what I remember, I think I even asked, okay, like communication wise, like what's going on here? Because for me, I don't go backwards. Luckily, he doesn't have any social media or anything like that, so I don't see him. I never saw him in my feed ever again. So everything was just like, okay, we're gonna end this chapter and turn the page.
Wait, but you guys are back together.
Yes.
So this whole thing about like when I picture my future, I don't see you in it, but like you're in it now.
It's been years.
So did you have the conversation? Like, did you ever talk about the breakup and like?
Oh, of course.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, of course. But like 4 years later, and we've lived separate lives. Like
4 years is a while.
I mean, he was with someone long term. I had moved. I bought a house. I was engaged at one point. I never thought I would ever speak to him again. And then we talked about it, and you know, that's where it was really clear that it was a timing thing and not a compatibility thing. Because when we did get back and were spending time with each other, it just felt so natural. It's almost like my nervous system was like, okay, like we're just conversating, we have so much in common, didn't want it to end. That kind of thing. But I think it took the 4 years of complete separate everything to then, because, you know, there was like no cell in our bodies that were the same at that point.
Yeah.
So.
4 years. Like,
Of course we talked about it, yeah. Because I was like, the hell, dude? Do you regret it? He's like, yes, I do.
Oh, yeah. Was that conversation super uncomfortable?
I'm like, hello? I mean, we're engaged now. We just got engaged in August.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it's absolutely surreal. Like, this book was published end of July and we got engaged August 9th. It's just, and like, this is the craziest, like, little, if you're like a data correlation person, like my first book came out, right? 3 months later, the breakup happened. Then the seed was planted for this book. Because earlier you asked how this book came about. Yes. I didn't answer your question. It was basically writing saved me after the breakup. And like that then, me trying to make sense of it, I'm like, what? There has to be like a theme or a pattern that people go through after a breakup. And I was like, what would be the phase? And I just kind of jotted them down. And then that's really the seed for this book. And that is the 5 phases of the breakup. Okay. That's in this book.
Yes.
And a lot of this is just straight up my diary, which it's like, here's my bleeding heart. Go ahead and read it. Enjoy. You know, let me know what you think. But yeah, but like this book was in creation and halfway like on the way to being done when we reconnected.
Wow. Okay.
And so I didn't. The way this book ends is not how I originally ever thought, because he wasn't in my life when I started seriously writing it.
Yeah, I know. You did the 4 year
like,
later
what is
thing.
time?
I was like, wait. And I was like trying to go back to the first page. I was like, was that his name? Like, is it him? And I was like, oh my God, wait. I was like, I'm gonna ask.
Yes.
Turns out they're engaged, so that answers that question.
Spoilers for anyone who's gonna buy this book and read it.
I know, that is.
Spoiler. Okay, you went through though, like after the breakup, something that I felt very deeply was this whole like journey to discovering yourself. You also talk about the fact that you didn't have your period for a long time. Like, your body was very clearly physically feeling a lot of things. You got diagnosed with, what is it? Hashimoto's,
Yes.
which I hadn't heard of till I read the book. And then
Okay.
the more you talked about it, I was like, oh, that seems logically like something your body would go through. But can you tell us more about the healing process that you went through? Because it seems like you really, like, the solo trip happened and you did a lot of like healing work. So you went to that very cold doctor.
Dr. Jan.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
She did not think I was funny at all.
You tried really hard.
I really did try. My goodness. Like, if you're a fan of Strengths Finders, like, woo's like my number 8 strength, you know, like, and woo is basically like you love meeting new people and, like, you know, cracking the code, right? Like connecting with them. So I was trying to do that with Dr. Jan. It didn't work.
No.
But the healing journey, I was, you know, before we had like started recording, I'd mentioned to everyone, like, I couldn't fit everything in there. It was a full year of just trying different things and a lot of investing, honestly. So I did like spend a lot of like savings, but I felt like at the time it was so worth the investment of just like going big. So I lost my period right after the breakup from, you know, May until December.
Wow.
And like it was scary, you know?
I too had physical reactions to breakups, and I just thought I was like, I didn't know that was something that a lot of other people go through, and the fact that breakups do present themselves physically in ourselves. It's not just like an emotional, mental thing that you're going through. It's your body literally has a physical reaction. One of the main things that I went through, at least initially, was just not like losing my appetite. And that's not me. I'm a snacker. Like, I love a snack. I love a late night snack, you know, and I love food. So it just was really hard for me to have to not only go through a breakup and process those things that happened, but also denying myself something that I enjoy, which is food. And that was one of the things that I didn't realize when, that breakup happened, that would, you know, manifest in that way. So I guess I'm just curious too, because I want to know what other physical, you know, manifestations that have come from breakups. Both of you, Vanessa too.
There was a visceral physical reaction to it, and I think like one of the ways I manifest stress in general is I don't feel it mentally. Like I ruminate at times, but I don't always recognize it. And like, so it manifests physically and my body will be like, yo girl, like you ain't, like the body's so smart and will do whatever it needs to do to get your attention.
Yeah.
And for me, mine was like drastically like altered by like you were saying, Melissa, just the connection between the physical and the mental state and the emotional state and how it can manifest. Like me losing my period, I think was a direct correlation to I was ready to have kids with Corey. I was ready. Like we had just 2 weeks or maybe what was it, like 5 days before the breakup, talked about keeping our foot on the gas,
right,
and cheersing to our future. And I was that's why it was so confusing, like so close after him coming home and saying like, yo, the future, it's not this. And I'm like, the heck? Like, so there was this feeling of being close to like starting a family and starting that next chapter, and I was really excited about it. So something happened when he left and was like, this isn't for me, that I was like, there was this belief that was like, oh, you, like without him, like you're not having kids, like he was your guy. And I think that like it took from like May until December, and I went to this like Reiki session that this like, because you know when you get those ideas and they feel kind of just out of nowhere, it's like, whoa, it's like a little bolt of light, and you're like, shit, I gotta write that down, that was really good. And it's like, if you don't write it down, it's like gone forever.
Yeah.
And you're like, dang, that was wisdom that came from somewhere. And so I had one of those moments in December that and I think it was a culmination of a lot of the healing journey, physical and different things I was supporting myself with, and then this like full like finale, if you will, this Reiki session on winter solstice. So it was like December 21st, which I love love me the seasons. I love that, like, tie to nature. Call me a Capricorn freak. I love it. I've got 7 planets in Capricorn. What up? So earthy, so muddy. So it's like, so that happened. And then this bolt of lightning wisdom was just like, hey, like, it wasn't him that was the ability to have kids.
No.
And then it was just, my period came the next day. So it goes, so to me, I took that as, holy cow, the body is so intelligent. You have to support it with, you know, different, and that will look different for everyone. Like what you do and what you decide will like look different. I know you guys just did a podcast on sound healing. I loved that modality. You know, like there's different, you know, think about what relaxes you. Are you a water person? Like, are you a sound person? Are you a textile? Like, get a massage. Like, try to think about how you learn and tailor that to fit your needs. And I was just on this like big exploration of like, what am I going to do? How can I support my physical? Because it was a culmination of like the breakup, and I was taking Adderall for 4 years and abusing Adderall, and got off that. So I think my whole body was just like shutting down in multiple ways.
Yeah. In your healing journey, you talked about how you took a month, was it, of leave from work. And if you're new to the podcast, then, well, I know you're new if you don't know Melissa quit her job a while ago. First of all, congratulations on your new role, Melissa. Yay. Cheers to you. But Melissa also had a moment where she'd had enough. She would text me sometimes just like in tears, you know, about what had happened at work, and was feeling very overwhelmed. And so she finally decided to let that go and move in a different direction. But of course, she had all these thoughts and feelings about, I think, like being selfish, right, Melissa? Did that come up for you? And and you taking this leave, you talk about feeling like you had to prove it to HR, obviously, about why you needed leave in the first place, which is normal, I guess. But you also talked about feeling selfish, not wanting to like abandon your team, and having to like tell your parents and like sell it to them as to why it mattered. So talk us through taking the time that you need.
That was like one of the hardest things. I had never asked for something that benefited only me and me alone. And I was like going in to ask my boss, and my boss and I are super close. I had worked for her for 7 years, and she just came to, like, I had a little book launch party at my house, and she came. And so she's been like one of the biggest supporters. Her name's Leanne. So went into her office, and I was like shaking, couldn't even get it out. And like, she was like, look, whatever it is, like, we can figure this out. You know, she saw that I was visibly like, you know, just so nervous. But yeah, asking for that was super hard. And she, of course, was like, yes, like, take the time you need, go for it.
It's amazing.
And like, so to have that support from her, I was like, okay, cool. First hurdle, nothing exploded. I asked for what I needed. And the world didn't end. And then, you know, telling friends and family was tough because I didn't look sick. That's the hard part. You know, it was all internal. Yeah. And like, that's the part that it was like, I wanted to prove to them that I was unwell, which is, what's up with that? What the hell is up with that?
I can speak to that, like feeling guilty for asking for what you need, and then feeling some type of way about it because you don't look like, you don't have a fever, like you know, when you the stereotypical, or what society deems as worthy to take off of work, especially in this society of work, we are conditioned to think that the only times we take off for work is when we are physically like ill, whether it's like we have a cold or a flu or whatever, or COVID, you know what I'm saying? And
or to take a month like incapacitated, right?
Yes.
Like,
yes.
And that's
like extended leave is reserved for, you're on maternity leave, or you have a family, like, you know, a family member passed away or something like that, or you need to do, you know, like long-term care. In terms of just leave, it just seems like long-term leave of that nature, like a month, for us, it just seems like, wow, I would never take that time off to do a vacation. And it just seems like to ask for something like that for something that you're going through that is affecting you that much, but it doesn't look like it. It just seems like, oh, are they gonna believe me? Are they gonna feel some type of way?
I did get some reactions like that.
Yeah.
You know, my mom was kind of like, well, that must be nice. Your
mom said that.
I'd love to take a month off. And the tone, or like the way, I'm already feeling self-conscious and like just it's uncomfy, right? To like call your parents up and say, kind of out of the blue, like, hey, I'm taking a month off, work approved it. And I thought that'd be kind of my ticket, like, work approved it. This is real. This is legit. Like, my doctor recommended me do this. And so this is happening. And it just wasn't, welcomed with open arms, and it was a little bit questioned, right? And I was already questioning it. So I'm like, ooh. So that was big.
Yeah. Melissa had that experience too, of like people being like, oh, you can just quit your job? How nice. That's great for you.
Yeah, and luckily, I know that my parents specifically, I have seen me come home from work and like how much it was affecting me and my happiness and just like my mental health. It was just, I feel like having left that job a year ago, it's so insane how much happier I am just like at a baseline. And I don't regret doing that for myself, obviously. But when I initially did quit, I did have some of those comments. I know that generally people were supportive, like majority of people were supportive of my decision, especially my work besties that I felt bad for leaving, but I did get some of those comments about like, oh wow, it must be real nice to be able to just quit your job without anything lined up.
It's like, yeah, I hit the lottery. I'm gonna be, it's just
great. I'm leaving because I'm unhappy, and I'm going to, like, what is this this alternative is not what I wanted. Like this decision that I was taking for myself was not what I wanted. I would have loved to be in a working environment that was healthy for me. And the fact that I got to a point where it was where I was going to just leave because without anything lined up.
There were more bad days than there were good days, right? The teeter-totter can only last so long until it's like, you know what? And that could be in a relationship, that could be in a company, that could be with a certain, family member. And then, you have, when that, ratio changes, it's time to go. And good for you. You left, and I love that the baseline is now like, you're like, oh, okay, this is cool. Like, but like to know also what the opposite feels like, the highs can feel higher. Like that yin and yang, being able to hold both like the crappy and the good, it makes you appreciate the good more, but also like it takes a certain amount of grit in life to go low, or allow yourself to do that, because it's not always fun, right?
Yeah, no. So I know there's people who are listening that have gone through probably a breakup as well. I mean, right? Like just statistically speaking, and maybe even recently. But your book specifically is titled "Thank You for Dumping Me," and so I wanted
Not the first title.
Oh, okay. Not the first title, but the title you ultimately landed on, right?
Yes.
And I chuckled when I read it because I had just been telling Melissa, we were talking about toxic relationships, and we had a whole episode about that, and and Melissa mentioned this earlier, we're now in really loving and safe and healthy relationships, but I look back now and I'm like, oh my God, thank you so much. I'm so glad that happened. Like, timing wasn't right, but it was never going to be right, and it just wasn't a fit. But for you are back with that person, and so I would love to hear more about like how you landed on this title and like what that means for you specifically.
This book, to be completely blunt, has nothing to do with him. Yes, he's involved, and he's quoted in the first couple chapters, and then majority is like that journey after, and it just so happened that reconnecting, he's like, whatever's good for the book, write it, which is so brave. I don't know if I'd be that brave.
That is brave.
I'd be like, can I read it? Which parts about it for me? But so this title is such an empowering kind of like, wait, what? Like, but it didn't start this way. It was first going to be called 20-something Dumped, because it was right after my first book called Your 20s. So I was like, oh, this is perfect. Like, how funny. I just wrote about the ups and downs of your 20s, and now I get dumped. Like 20-something dumped. It was going to be like a skip over from that. And then as I got more through it, and through, like, it evolved to like, God, this has been such a gift. And then I'm like, oh my God, like, I'm actually glad he like dumped me, or else I wouldn't have ever had these like breakthrough moments. And I'm like, oh my God, thank you for dumping me. So that's how it just evolved. And I think it does kind of encapsulate the journey and just the joy of even like both of you now, you're in a good relationship because you know what doesn't feel good, right?
Exactly.
Like sometimes it's best to go through the fire or like just take the job or like to just kind of let yourself go all in with a relationship, and like open your heart, and if it fails, it fails. If it doesn't work out, at least you kind of know, okay, this is what I don't want, and so it's easier to know what to look for like next time. But us getting back together, I think that the 4 years apart, like we had to go through some of the emotional or like changes. Like, I mean, I feel like I lived lifetimes in between, with like moving the pandemic. Okay.
Right.
Pandemic.
Right.
That was, remember that? So that happened. So that's like 20 years and 2 years.
Yeah.
I moved 6 times within the 4 years.
Oh my God.
So I was just moving and grooving. At one point lived with my second sister, Kelsey, my bestest friend, which I write. So it's kind of fun because the couple underlying tones of the book is friendship, like the importance of friends and leaning on people and asking for help. And so Kelsey, my sister's in there, like my friend Julie is in there, and leaning on them through the moves and different things, but finally ending up in my hometown in Modesto, which never thought I'd end up there, and reconnecting with Corey and just being in a completely different headspace, and him being so much more emotionally aware and open and like available. Yay.
Yay. Can we, you said that it was 4 years before you reconnected.
Yes.
Between my current relationship and the previous relationship was like 5 years. 5 years. And I didn't like, it was one of those things where I was just, it was that long. It was like
that's a
4 years.
significant amount of time.
And
Think
when
about
you're-
it, that's all of high school. Think about your freshman year to your senior. Are you the same person?
No. Yeah,
Hell
and
no.
so I really do relate to what you were talking about or just mentioning right now, where it's like there was so much learning that I did and it was necessary learning that I did for myself, and learning about myself, and then learning about the relationships that I have outside of that relationship. So, reinforcing my relationships with my family members, reinforcing my relationships with my friends, the ones, the constants, and that taking that time for myself definitely led me to the relationship that I am in right now. And I say that because we had met like before that 4 or 5 years where I got that breakup, or that had that relationship. We knew each other. We could have connected at that point because we've had these talks where it was like we both had crushes on each other, but the timing was not right. So having all those years, those 4 or 5 years of growth for us individually, ultimately grateful that it led to us connecting, a year ago. So it's crazy how much 4 years will do for you.
Totally.
Well, I guess timing also is really important.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we always close our shows by talking about how you can be more comfortable with the uncomfortable. I even wrote down one of your quotes. I fucking hate being uncomfortable. Was in the book. But we're going to ask you, for people who might be going through it right now, whether it just happened or they're deep in it and they're in their journey, how would you advise them to be more comfortable with that process?
Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm gonna try and let's see. And I also just heading into like winter, and like I feel like it's easier to be more in your feels, and like the holiday, it can be kind of a rough time of year. So there's a lot, and being with family can sometimes be really uncomfortable. Like I think right now, I think it evolves for me. Like it definitely evolves. Like right now, what I'm feeling to be more comfortable is like I need to take more just time to just write. Actually, I've kind of like stepped out of the like just my writing, because I'm like, it's done, run, like it takes up my entire being, right? So I'm like, okay, But I think having those practices that keep my feet on the ground, and like if I don't write, I don't know what I think, or like I love being like, you know, like in social environments, and it's been a busy summer, but I think to get to know how you really feel, whatever that looks like. For me, it's writing. For you, it may be a walk in the park. Like for another person, maybe calling a trusted friend and just like hearing yourself out loud. But like just take the time, I guess.
Yeah, or all those things.
Yeah.
And there are activities in my book as well.
Yes.
I don't know if you liked the activities, but
some of them were
yeah.
really, really helpful, and I think some of them I've actually learned how to do, like while I was going through my own journey.
Cool.
But maybe one of the ways people can be more comfortable with it is by finding solidarity and reading the book. So tell them how they can find you, how they can find the book.
The book is on Amazon in print, Kindle. I'm finishing the audiobook now.
I was going to ask you about that.
So,
Okay.
yeah, so that'll be coming out. And I guess, like, if you do read the book, I would love to hear from you. Like, the biggest compliment for, I think, someone who has written a book is hearing from someone who's read it and just sharing your experience with it, or a part that jumped out to you or whatever. So on Instagram's the easiest way, I think, to get a hold of me.
Okay. And
Yeah.
what's your handle? How do they find you?
Oh, it's just Hello Jessness. Yes.
There we go.
Yeah,
We'll
thanks
share
for
it.
having me.
Yes, well, thank you.
Again on the show. Oh my
I
goodness.
know,
Right after the
this-
book. We'll have you back again.
I'm definitely more comfortable than the beginning of the podcast, so that's great.
That's how we we understand when our guests come on. It's a little nerve-wracking, but we hope that our genuine conversation, because we love connecting with you, and I'm so glad that you were able to come on to the show again. So hopefully you were able to ease into our conversation with
Totally,
you.
so fun. I
Yeah.
love your guys' show, and
Yay.
this was so fun.
Yeah, and Melissa's going to share where you can find us.
Yeah, so thank you again, Jessica, for joining us today. And thank you all for listening to another episode of the I'm Uncomfortable podcast. Be sure to be following Jessica on her platforms. We'll share them and tag her in all of our posts. So definitely follow her, buy her book, and follow us on Instagram as well at I'mUncomfortable.podcast. Same handle for TikTok. We're also on YouTube now at I'm Uncomfortable Podcast. We post the video version. If you want to see our lovely faces, definitely go over to YouTube. Or if you listen on any of your platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, you'll find us there. And lastly, we also have a Facebook group where we release our episodes one day early. So if you want to get the exclusive club, you want to join our Uncomfortable Club, please do that. And we release new episodes every week. So we will see you then. Bye.